Gospel Reflections for the 25th Sunday of Ordinary Time, Year C, 21st of September 2025. The Gospel text is from Luke chapter 16, verses 1 to 13. The main focus of this Gospel reading is this: whenever a crisis arises due to conflict of values or negation of the values of God's kingdom, the disciples of Christ must be shrewd and prudent enough to take a prompt decision in favor of the kingdom values and come out of that crisis successfully. In brief, shrewd and prompt decision to be made in favor of God's kingdom. In the given parable of today's gospel, we hear about the manager or steward of a rich man who is going to be fired from his job or stewardship on charges of squandering or wasting his master's property, as chapter 16 verse 1 says. Faced with a personal crisis of his impending dismissal from job, he swiftly takes a shrewd and imaginative, prompt and resolute action, though it is fully deceitful, dishonest and unjust. He offers his master's debtors hefty discounts, 50% for oil and 20% for wheat, as verse 7 says, with the hope that they will welcome him into their homes when he is fired from his job. Shockingly enough, instead of expressing his anger over such an enormous loss and vouching for a stern action against this cheat, the master commends his action or commends the action of this manager or steward. On the surface level, this story looks like Jesus is teaching his disciples to cheat people or to be dishonest like that steward. But a careful study shows that he wants to teach them about the necessity to use every means at their disposal, as the cunning steward used to prepare for their eternal destiny. As verse 9 says, what is praised is not the steward's dishonesty, but his shrewd decision, or as the text puts, because he had acted shrewdly or in a cunning manner in verse 8, when he was confronted with such a serious crisis. The lesson is clear. The disciples of Jesus are to show much more shrewdness than this steward and make a drastic decision in favor of the values of God's kingdom to reach their eternal destiny. Jesus explained what he means exactly. If the children of this age, that is, people of this world, are so smart in worldly business matters, why should not the children of light, that is, Christian disciples, be smarter in spiritual matters or matters of God's kingdom? As verse 8 says, we call ourselves the children of light, but are we smart enough to uphold the kingdom values, especially when they are negated and challenged in the world? In fact, the message of the kingdom proclaimed by Jesus confronts our consciences, creating a crisis in our minds whether to accept its values and live by them or to reject them. In a world where we daily confront hatred, violence, injustice, corruption, dishonesty, unrest, and lovelessness, if we decide to live by the values of peace, values of love, peace, justice, truthfulness, and concern for the poor and the marginalized, we have to act like this cunning steward, resolutely and decisively. Again and again, we need to make a shrewd, prudent, and firm decision of the mind to love those who hate us or do harm to us, to serve those who hurt us so badly, to forgive those who do not deserve forgiveness, and to sacrifice our selfish desires in favor of genuine love reconciliation, and peace, especially when our human nature tells us to do just the opposite. Are we as prudent as the steward in this parable to overcome these natural or human tendencies and come out successfully like him? In our personal and spiritual life, we need to ask ourselves whether we use the same shrewdness and prompt decision and action. For example, once we become addicted to alcohol, drugs, mobile phone, internet, TV, sex, etc., it can damage our character and cause unrest in our family. No one can overcome deep-rooted addictions by half-hearted resolutions or just by fighting with the thing or substance that causes addiction, such as alcohol or drug. One has to accept one's defeat over that addictive substance or thing and admit one's helplessness or powerlessness to overcome that bad habit. One has to take a drastic decision, like the steward manager, to surrender oneself into God's hands and allow Him to take control of one's life instead of permitting the addictive substance or thing to do so. To cite another example, if we do not want to be a part of the corrupt practices of the world in our workplaces and public life, we need to make shrewd plans to escape from its all-pervading trap, sometimes by making a lot of lame excuses and just avoiding those occasions which make us fall into that bad habit or corruption. There is always a temptation to follow the crowd because everybody is doing it, though wrong, and avoid consequences or just to keep quiet. The common refrain is, "Why should I burn my fingers?" In the midst of so many conflicting values and allurements in the world today, we need to use the same resoluteness and shrewdness like the cunning steward in order to preserve our goodness, honesty, and integrity. Whenever we are confronted with worldly values which totally negate the gospel values, our conduct or action reveals whether we are children of light or children of this generation, that is, this secular world, as mentioned in chapter 16, verse 8. We fail to be the children of light by our failure to take prompt action, by postponing decisions indefinitely, by sleeping over them, and by keeping total silence out of fear of backlash, opposition, and criticism. In another sense, the Lord has entrusted us with the stewardship of material and spiritual wealth and responsibilities in our particular states of life or jobs. Today's gospel text leads us to self-examination whether we use our master's wealth responsibly or dishonestly and wastefully, as the steward of this particular parable did. We are not really owners of anything, but only stewards of which we have to give an account. God gives us material wealth not only for our needs, but also to test our faithfulness to His kingdom values. Jesus calls material possessions dishonest wealth, or to use original language, unrighteous mammon. Confer chapter 16, verse 9. Because, as St. Paul puts it, the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil, and in their eagerness to be rich, some have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves with many pains. 1 Timothy chapter 6, verses 9 to 10. Therefore, be on your guard. Otherwise, allurement of wealth might turn out to be an unrighteous mammon that makes you children of darkness of this corrupt world. What is your choice? A prayer. Gracious Lord, grant that we may take shrewd and prompt action in favor of your holy will in times of crisis. in our personal and spiritual life, as well as in crisis situations of our world today. Amen.